Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a little chat here about what I call my three jewels in life. Um, when we speak to life, I always say things really, the most important lessons are pretty simple. But when we start talking about the landscape of life, sometimes we like to dice and slice things up and get really complex and talk a lot about little issues and things like that. But sometimes it's just important to get really, really high level and just come up with concepts that are just very, very simple and succinct and don't necessarily go over the place. I have a few things that I kind of come up with to sort of talk about the landscape of life. I have my tree of knowledge. Ooh, sounds special, doesn't it? And where I break things up into spirit, energy, and expression. And that's, energy, emotion, and expression. I don't know my own tree of knowledge. And that's another way of sort of dicing and slicing up how the fabric of life into sort of three high-level components that all ultimately work together. So when we start talking about a lot of different things floating around, we can turn it into some sort of a cohesive story, something I like to do. And but at the very top of my site, I put this three jewel thing of love, strength, and wisdom. And this kind of it just kind of came to me like so many things. Everything I talk about comes as a result of a process that I'm going through personally. I'm always in a process of fingers crossed self-discovery of learning, and I try to put my earpiece back in. I tried to kind of put the most high-level priorities of life into context. And I realized there isn't one. If we say something like, oh, awareness, that's a piece of the puzzle. If we say health, that's a piece of the puzzle. And so I came up with this idea of love, strength, and wisdom. And I spent a lot of my time on wisdom. It's something that just, this search for answers, and not just intellectual answers, but just very, very answers that actually have something important to how we live in the fabric of life. And then, of course, I found out wisdom isn't enough. There's situations in life where you can have all the wisdom in the world, and if you don't have strength and resilience and persistence, you're almost far better being a fool with strength than you are a wise person who's just very, very weak, who doesn't have any strength. And then I also found out that you can be wise and strong, but if you don't have some grip on love, what love is, there's a fuel missing in all this. We all come from somewhere in our life, in how we choose to experience life. We can come from a very sort of cold and robotic and logic-driven place. And I honestly, at this time of my life, I really don't think anything is wrong. It's just a matter of choices. So I certainly am not going to say anything is wrong. But for those people who, as we say, want to live from the heart, that's a place that requires love as fuel. So I kind of say like this, it's like, we can, when it comes to these three jewels, often in life, we're sort of spending time working on one at a time. And we're hoping that will open a doorway to have some meaning as we get something else. We can start off and really try to be a strong person and muscle our way through things. And then we'll find out that without wisdom, we're wasting energy. And without love, we lose a reason. We can only build strength for the purpose of having strength for so long before it loses meaning. A perfect example would be an athlete. They can become very, very strong and push and really be addicted to the whole process of just being strong. And then eventually they find out they got to be wiser, and now they go about use their energy. Otherwise, they're just running around chasing strength, and they actually become a better athlete when they become wiser about what they do. And then, of course, we look at a lot of athletes too, and they get families, and the families soften them. They have kids and wives, and additionally, and at first it's kind of a strange place, and then suddenly it counterbalances, and it adds a whole new meaning to why they go out and do what they do. Well, we don't have to be athletes, but the analogy falls true, I think, for any of us. each of these, in their highest level, is a lot of work. We don't need to be at our highest level. We don't need the strongest of the strong. We don't need to be the wisest of the wise. And we don't need to be the most deeply loving, warm and squishy person in the world. There's sort of a threshold of, this is going to be just one of these chats where the earpiece is just coming in and out. So I always like when it adds a human element to it. So, yeah, we don't need to be uber, but there's a threshold to all of these things that we need to get above. You know, in terms of our strength, we're always going to be fragile in the face of the grand scheme of life, but we want to get over that threshold where we're not compromising ourselves out of a lack of strength, or we're cowering away from things out of a lack of strength. And in terms of wisdom, you know, since I come from that place, I can speak where any of these things, if we try to overemphasize any of these things and use them as a crutch, we will fail. You know, we try to overpower our lives just with strength. At some point, well, it'll collapse. It'll cease to work. If we try to overpower our lives with wisdom, at some point, it'll cease to work, because there's an aspect of life that is chaos and unpredictable, and we can't throw wisdom at chaos. Chaos is what it is, and we have to figure it out when we get there. And sometimes in those situations, it's just a matter of adaptation and persistence, i.e. strength and adaptation. And wisdom isn't going to cut it, and that's a lot. That's a good percentage of life. Good percentage of wisdom is understanding that much of life is adaptation and managing chaos. And then, of course, love, we all know, is not the thing, the romantic notion that we think it is. It takes us a lifetime, often, you know, a better part of our life before we begin to get a grip on what love really is. We get the warmth, we get the coziness. That's after we often fall for the passion and the desire, and then we realize that that's just a thing. It's not necessarily love. You know, that's a very common cycle we go through in our youth. And then we're like, oh, what is love? And then we find something we think is love, and a lot of times, not sometimes it is, and we find out that leads to work. Maybe it leads to children, and we're up at 3 a.m, you know, holding our kids while they're crying. And then we find out, oh wow, maybe this is love, because I actually don't mind getting up 3 a.m. I mean, I kind of mind, but somehow once I get there, I'm all right with it. So love, real love can give us a sort of almost superhuman strength at times. It gives us purpose. It's a fuel for purpose. And, you know, one of the great challenges of love is sort of what I might call our sort of human view of love and the spiritual view of love. And people like myself who are very spiritual, we're always, you notice a common theme is the idea of love being something between yourself and sort of whatever you want to call it, God or the universe or your relationship with life as a whole. Whereas the very human view of love is always sort of people to people. And that's a dangerous view of love in terms of being our only view of love. Not dangerous that we would think that, you know, loving another person, if there's anything wrong with that. It's a very limited view of love, and we can fall into the world of jealousy and demands and desires. And, you know, when I see relationships fall apart, it's always because one person or the other starts to get these unrealistic demands on the other person as to what love should be for them, and it falls apart. And wise people, strong people who are meant to be together always get past that. And then the part of that is having to redefine what love is. And so love is a process. I'll have a whole nother chat on that. But love is a process, just like wisdom and strength. Strength has a lot of nuances to it. It's not just muscle. You know, there's a lot of finesse that goes on when we talk about strength of life. Any of you that have grown through a bit in your life all know this. There's times where we really got to be strong-handed and muscle through things. Other times we just got to be sort of gently strong. And so all of these things take a tremendous amount of expertise. And that's one of the things why I always say when we're learning about life, when I'm teaching, when you're learning, when I'm learning, relax. These are all even when we start to get a grip on these things at all, we all know it. Then it becomes a daily practice of seeing if we can remember how to work with this stuff. And we're always fragile in the face of life. So, if you're older, this is a reminder of these things, and sometimes it's kind of need to check on these categories of our life. Am I falling short in my life because I'm lacking strength? Am I just not being persistent enough? Am I, thinking that I can get the things I want without having strength if I'm just nice and wise enough? How's love doing? And do I feel loved? Is that an issue with somebody else? Issue with myself? Do I still view love the same way I did when I was 15 years old? Or am I reinventing my view of love in a way that I can find ways to feel love, even though I'm not getting all the experiences with, checking all the boxes that I think love is supposed to give me? And of course, wisdom. We're constantly, am I really looking at the nuances of things? Am I paying attention to the mechanics of life? Am I taking notes and seeing if are there ways that I can leverage my wisdom to use my energy more wisely? Yeah. So love, strength, and wisdom. We need all three of these, and we often work on one at the sacrifice of another, and then hopefully we can bring that in and start working on something else. And then if we're ever lucky enough to get at least to that threshold where all these are kind of sort of working in our favor, then we get to that zone where it's maintenance and remembering all those things that we so quickly forget. So that's my little chat on this whole concept of love, strength, and wisdom. I highly recommend you make these your 3 jewels in life. If you get to work on a couple at a time, great. Maybe it's just one. And it's a long school. This is your core of your school of life that starts from the moment you are a quasi-adult until the day you die. And these are always going to be pieces of the puzzle. You're gonna have your moments. Even the strongest person is going to have their moments of feeling very, very weak and fragile. And then the most loved person is going to have their moments of feeling deeply unloved. And the wisest person in the world is going to feel like the biggest fool on the face of the planet at many times. And that's just life humbling us and putting us back to school again. So ponder that idea. And these are all choices we make, how we want to view life and slice it up. I'm just presenting ways, if you would like to own these things as your jewels. They're mine. And you'll hear at the end of my talks, I always often end them by just saying, wishing people love, strength, and wisdom, because it's an acknowledgement we need all 3 of these guys to get through this game of life in some positive fashion. All right, until our next chat, thank you for listening. Love, strength, and wisdom.